Okay, welcome to a product review about the fairy horsebow made by Whitetail. This is a bow I've been using for a very long time, so I know a little bit about this bow, and it's a very good bow. Let me tell you that at first. But first I'm going to read out some specifics, some specs, some specifications about this bow, and then we'll get later on with the review and how it looks and everything. But the bow itself, I've written all these specs down since I'm not that good with numbers. But the bow itself has a length of 50 inch. The draw weight is available up from 20 to 60 pounds. Myself, I have the 30 and 35 pound version of it. The race height is 5.5 to 6 inches. It's a Korean horse bow. You can see that from the tips and from the handle itself a little bit, because the traditional Korean bow has a different handle. It's a fast flight string and it's made out of carbon and maple wood. The arrow pass itself is made from a kind of leather, and the price range is around 150 euros. Now, the bow itself is a very nice bow. The bow is, like it said, made from carbon. There's very nice fairy inside, and it's made from white feather. Now, white feather isn't a true Korean bow maker, I believe. The bows come from Korea, but it's imported and exported from JVD in the Netherlands. That means it's not really traceable who makes these bows. But there are true Korean bows at a very good price point. The overall quality from the bow is good, except from the handle. I've been using these bows for a beginner course, and in the beginner course they are polished a little bit and not always used at the arrow rest. And the arrow rest is one of the specific points of the bow which is pretty weak, since it's leather and not ray skin. So these are not that durable over time. Now, the bow itself performs really well. I'm going to demonstrate it as well. So, like I said, the performance of the fairy, since it's a pretty cheap Korean bow, I mean, they range from around 150 to almost 2,000 euros for a horse bow at this given price. And since I've been using these for more than 2 years now, and they still perform very well. They lose a little bit of poundage to my feeling, but that is fine after all these years and the usage of them. I think it's a very good bow for at its price point. You do need some reinforcement around the arrow pass. As you can see over here, I've put in some extra skin over there. I would recommend using ray skin though, but this does the job. Need to change it every year. And apart from that, there's a nice sticker on the inside here and a nice labeling of fairy over here. The tips, like I said, are Korean tips. That means the typical tip over here, and with the arrow pass on the back. It's a nice Korean string, and apart from that, the handle, like I said. The curvings of the bow are like a Korean bow, and it's overall a very nice bow. Now, the performance itself, I'm gonna do a step back and make a draw with it. And it's a very good draw up until this point over here. You can draw it further, but this is the first point where it gets staggered a little bit. You can overdraw past it, but that is when the poundage gets up really high. In the beginning, there's a little bit of crackling you can hear, but I think that's most part of the leather itself. Apart from the part over here where you can feel really resistance in the bow, and it does give a little bit sound as well. Vibrations in the bow, you can really feel that in the handle, also really in the limbs. It is a very nice bow, but like I said, it's a very cheap bow. If you flick the string like this, you can feel vibrations all over the bow. And 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 seconds in the handle. Nonetheless, we're still going to shoot this bow, of course. Now, how does the fairy shoot? Of course, we're using the thumb draw, since it's a Korean bow. We draw it from overhand all the way out to the back. And at this point, you can really hear some crackling in the bow itself. The arrows are a little bit short for me, but that is fine for today. 1, 2, all the way up there, and release. 1, 2, all the way back, a little bit further than it should be, and 3. The bow feels really springy, and the springiness of the bow is a feature I really like. We have the SKB from Samik also, review comes in later, but that bow itself is really tight. You can really feel everything in a bow, and it's a little bit springy, and some people find that a little childish, but I think it's a nice feature of this bow. The draw experience is really relaxed, and the release experience is also really relaxed. I have no problems drawing these bows with a little bit of training, even without a thumb guard, since only 35 pound. Up to 40, I think you believe you can do it without a thumb guard. Above that, that's starting to get a little bit difficult. But the bow itself, it is really light. The draw experience is very smooth. Only a little bit of sound, but that's due of the, I think, pretty cheap leather, since the tips are starting also to wear out a little bit after a while. But the bow itself performs very well. I think I could really recommend this bow to anyone who wants to start using the Korean traditional archery, KTA. And I think this is one of the best bows to start with, since it's so easy, accessible, and so well performing at its given price. I mean, you can really smoothly draw onto it. 1, 2, easy with this kind of handle. The only bad downside is you cannot do really the Korean gripping around it, since the handle is too small for that. The normal Korean bows have a thicker handle, and that's one of the big downsides of these bows if you do want to perform Korean traditional archery. The bow handle itself is not really suitable for that, at least less suitable. The bow I just showed, though, is one of the older versions. The new versions have a little bit of a wider handle. As you can see, it's not thicker, it's a little bit wider. So that gives a little bit more space for the Korean grip. Although it would have been nicer if this was a full wide handle, so you can have the full coverage. I don't really understand why they did only a part of it, but it is a nice advantage above the older versions. On the website you only see the bows with the thinner handle, but I believe this is the newer version of the bow, or maybe even a little bit of a limited edition or something. But this handle does perform a little bit nicer, although it does take some getting used to. This bow is the 30-pound version. The draw experience is really good from this one, and even in the end it can go back further. As you can see, the arrow almost goes over its point, but if you go all the way back for your Korean draw, it is a very nice experience. I think out of all the bows I have, this is the nicest draw experience at its given price. I have also a bow from Simon's company. That bow is 500 euros, and this bow draws really smooth and the arrows go straight, at least for the 20 meters we shoot here. And this handle takes really some adaptation to it. The material is no different, so the handle is still a little bit cheap. The arrow pass is also really cheap, but overall it is a nice addition versus the other one. So the overall verdict of the bow. I'm going to give a number between 1 and 5, 1 to 5 stars. And we're going to start with the quality versus price of the bow. And I think that's a very good 4 stars. Shooting with only beginners, so people who've never held a bow before, for over 3 years now, I believe, at least between 2 and 3 years, and the bow still performs well. The only thing that needs to be replaced is the string for 2 times, and the gripping itself has worn out completely. I think it's fair to give it a 4 star rating on that. The material of the bow also gets 3 stars. 3 stars because the handle is really cheap, and I think if they used a little bit more premium leather in there, that would have been already a lot better. And if they use a Race King Arrow Pass, you wouldn't have the problems with it wearing out at all in the first 2 years. After 2 years, everything needs to replace because of the friction. I mean, the friction comes from really twisting the string a little bit in, so it's extra friction on this. If you use it with a Mediterranean draw, I think that's a little bit easier because it doesn't get pushed into this as much. The price, like I said, is 150 euros. The material, 3 out of 5 stars. The price versus quality is 4 stars, and I think that earns this bow a very good, almost 4 star rating at its given price point. I forget something, the draw experience, of course. For me, the draw experience for its price is 5 stars. It's really smooth, and in the end you can feel it really stacking, but it does get there. I mean, it doesn't really work against me, only in the very end a little bit. You hear a little bit of sound in the bow, you can feel vibrations all over the bow, even in the limbs for a good 3 seconds, but that doesn't mean that it shoots really bad. It doesn't frustrate me at all. I think overall this bow is really worth it. I would really recommend it. Overall, 3.5 stars for the bow given all these specifications, and I would really recommend it as your first Korean bow. Thank you so much, and I'll see you at another review.